Have you ever wondered why some people seem to choose partners based on bank accounts rather than connection? Let's talk about what's really going on beneath the surface. When people use the term gold digger, they're usually describing someone who enters relationships primarily for financial gain. But here's what most people miss. This isn't about labeling someone as good or bad. It's a behavioral pattern. And like all patterns, it has roots. It comes from somewhere. And it can show up in anyone, regardless of gender, though our culture tends to focus on certain stereotypes. So, where does this pattern actually come from? Let's start with the most basic human need, security. We all want to feel safe. For some people, that safety gets deeply connected to money. Maybe they grew up watching a parent struggle to pay bills. Maybe they experienced real poverty. Maybe they saw their family lose everything. When you've felt that kind of fear, your brain creates a blueprint. It says, never again. Financial stability stops being just practical. It becomes emotional survival. Think about this. If you grew up in a home where money was always tight, where every unexpected expense caused panic, you learned something powerful. You learned that money equals peace of mind. That's not greed, that's conditioning. Attachment patterns play a role too. Some people learned early on that love is conditional, that care comes with expectations. If a child grows up seeing relationships as transactions, where affection is earned or withheld based on performance or provision, they internalize that model. They might unconsciously seek partners who fit that familiar pattern, even if it's unhealthy. Here's the part people miss. Sometimes this behavior isn't about wanting luxury. It's about wanting to never feel powerless again. Now let's talk about upbringing and culture, because they shape us more than we realize. In some families, marriage is discussed openly as an economic strategy. Children hear messages like marry well or don't struggle like we did. These aren't always said with bad intentions. Often they come from parents who genuinely want their children to have easier lives. But the message sinks in. Your partner's financial status matters as much as or more than emotional compatibility. Culture amplifies this. Look at how media portrays success. Wealth is shown as the ultimate achievement. Luxury is glamorized. Relationships with wealthy people are presented as aspirational. Social media makes it worse, creating constant comparison and pressure to display a certain lifestyle. In communities where resources are scarce, these messages get even stronger. Survival thinking kicks in. People learn to be strategic about relationships because being strategic might mean the difference between stability and hardship. None of this excuses harmful behavior, but it explains it. Let's dig deeper into why money becomes emotional safety for some people. Money represents more than just buying power. It represents control over your environment. It represents protection from chaos. It represents not having to depend on anyone else, or ironically, being able to depend on someone financially so you don't face the world alone. For someone who grew up with financial trauma, a wealthy partner isn't just attractive. They're a solution. The anxiety that's been sitting in their chest for years finally has an answer. That's why you'll sometimes see people stay in unfulfilling relationships with financially secure partners. They're not just weighing pros and cons, they're managing deep fear. Status is another factor. In many social circles, your worth is measured by visible success. The car you drive, the places you vacation, the partner you have. For some people, having a wealthy partner becomes proof of their own value. It's external validation turned into a relationship strategy. This might sound shallow, but remember, we all seek validation. The difference is where we look for it. So what happens inside these relationships? When one person approaches a relationship transactionally, it changes everything. Trust becomes complicated. The person providing resources might wonder, would you be here if I lost everything? The person seeking resources might feel reduced to their looks or youth. Both people sense something is off, but neither can fully relax. Power imbalances develop. The person with money often holds more decision-making power, consciously or not. The other person might feel obligated, grateful, or trapped. Over time, resentment builds on both sides. Attraction gets murky too. Is there genuine connection, or is this a mutual arrangement both people have silently agreed to? Some couples navigate this honestly and find peace with it. Others live in quiet discomfort, never quite addressing what their relationship is really built on. Long-term satisfaction suffers when the foundation is unstable. If your relationship is primarily based on what someone can provide materially, what happens when circumstances change? When people age? When wealth fluctuates? The relationship has no deeper structure to fall back on. Here's a question worth sitting with. Can you truly love someone when the relationship is conditional on their resources? So why does this pattern continue even when it causes problems? Because it gets reinforced. When someone successfully partners with a wealthy person, they experience immediate rewards. Financial stress disappears, lifestyle improves, social status rises. The brain registers this as success, and the pattern strengthens. There's also social validation. Friends might admire the lifestyle, family might express relief or pride. The person feels they've achieved something valuable. This external approval makes it harder to question whether the relationship meets their deeper emotional needs. Fear plays a role too. Once you've built a life around someone else's resources, leaving feels terrifying. You've become dependent. Your identity might be wrapped up in this lifestyle.
The thought of going back to financial struggle or even just modest living creates panic. The pattern becomes a trap, but it's a trap that feels necessary. Let's talk about healthier perspectives, because understanding doesn't mean accepting. Emotional independence matters. This means knowing you can handle life's challenges on your own, even if you choose to share them with someone else. It means your sense of security comes from within, from your own skills and resilience, not just from someone else's bank account. Self-worth beyond resources is crucial. Your value as a person isn't determined by your income or your partner's income. It's not determined by your appearance or youth either. Real self-worth comes from character, from how you treat people, from what you contribute to the world in ways that matter. Partnership should be about balance. Yes, practical considerations matter. Shared financial goals are part of healthy relationships, but they shouldn't be the foundation. The foundation should be mutual respect, genuine affection, shared values, and the desire to build something together, not just benefit from what one person already has. Ask yourself, am I looking for a partner or a solution? Am I offering connection or a transaction? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're honest ones. Here's what matters most. Understanding why people develop certain relationship patterns doesn't mean judging them or excusing harm. It means recognizing that behavior comes from somewhere. It comes from fear, from past pain, from the messages we absorbed growing up. When we understand the psychology behind these patterns, we can make better choices. We can recognize when we're acting out of fear instead of genuine desire. We can question what we really need from a relationship. We can build connections based on something more solid than money or security. We can also extend more compassion to others and to ourselves. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to feel safe. The question is whether we're looking for safety in places that can actually provide it, or whether we're repeating patterns that leave us feeling more empty than before. Real security doesn't come from someone else's wealth. It comes from knowing yourself, trusting your own strength, and choosing relationships that honor who you are, not just what you need. That's where healing begins. That's where real connection becomes possible.